Gulf Coast Gardening, a private garden tour. Hi, I'm Alice. Chris has agreed to share some gardening tips with us from his experience gardening in the Big Bend area of Florida.
Hi, I'm Chris. I live in Big Bend, right on the coast in Taylor County. Gardening down here or doing any kind of plant growing down here is unique. There are a lot of challenges with the salts. You have to choose plants that are salt tolerant. The soils down here are very interesting. 100% sand. That makes things even more challenging. I've finally got things to grow that are acceptable down here and do well, but it took a while. The main thing is the soil.
Did you have a soil test?
Yes.
And what was the result?
It was low in everything and high in pH. The pH was like 8.4 because of all the lime rock. The limestone bed is very close to the surface. So your soil is high pH. You have to bring it down. Amend the soil with sulfur.
Tell us a little bit about that process.
I bought the sulfur in a 40-pound bag. Before I started any of the plantings, I amended the soil with it and let it sit a few weeks. Then we tested the soil again. It moved at about 1 point. When I did start planting, I used pine straw as mulch. That helps reduce the pH down. I like to have it in the 5.5 to 6.5 range. If I can, try to keep it as low as I can get it.
When you do your amendments, do you need to do them every year, or is this just a one-time?
I'll take another soil sample in February or March and see what it needs. Before I do any spring plantings, I'll amend the soil whichever way it needs. I'm sure it'll need more sulfur or more pine straw.
When you say spring planting, what month is that for this zone?
Now we're in 9. It's gotten a little earlier. I usually do it in April, about tax time.
That's a good way to remember.
Yeah, I learned that in the Master Gardener program. You want to see the plantings? This is actually the second project after we took the Master Gardener course. The first project is in front. This is mine. The main plantings are native plants. This is a native milkweed and the coontie and the Spanish needles right in here. They came up on their own. I'm mainly interested in planting plants that attract butterflies. These plants are also subject to flooding about twice a year. Sometimes it's just the extreme high tides we have in the wintertime and the spring, or tropical storms. Last week when Debbie came through, this whole area about right up to where y'all are parked was covered in water from the Gulf.
That would be over here on the driveway area.
Yes.
And that was all underwater.
Yes, and this was underwater too because this is a flowway.
This grass area through your fire pit in the back was underwater.
Yes.
So this bed, how long?
Oh, I think it's probably 35 feet. But it's enough for me to take care of and keeps me busy, especially in the summertime with the weeding. I love the butterflies. I think this is probably the best year I've had.
What kind of butterflies are you getting here?
These are the swallowtail right here. And then I had a monarch the other day, which was kind of early for a monarch. And there's a lot of pollinators, wasps and flies and moths.
Which kind of milkweed is this growing here?
This is the tropical milkweed, which is a non-native species. But I collect the seeds off of it and use the seeds to replant. I don't let them get away. I know there's been some controversy about the monarchs using the tropical milkweed. I also try to keep the native as much as I can.
So that in comparison to the tropical, which grows much bigger, Is there anything special you do with the tropical? I have heard about cutting it back.
Yes, I think the latter part of September, you're supposed to cut it back to the ground or close to the ground. And that way you don't get any of the butterflies hanging around or trying to overwinter. They're migratory, so that keeps them moving.
It's really beautiful. You've also got some other plants
Got
in it,
some
too.
mums in here and a hibiscus down here. The bumblebees really like the hibiscus.
When preparing a garden bed like this, what tip would you share with us?
You've got to do soil samples. That's the most important thing, is the soil samples and water. I have a soaker hose that I put in here to irrigate it with. You can't rely on the rainfall. It's too sporadic. Also, I use the slow release homogeneous fertilizer instead of the high nitrogen fertilizers. I don't fertilize my grass because it gets inundated too often with the Gulf of Mexico.
When it gets flooded like that, does it die back?
Sometimes,
Your soil looks dark compared to what I'd expect for pure sand.
yes, I put a lot of mulch in there and also a lot of potting soil. I mixed in with the sand, dug all the rocks out.
I know when you're in a coastal area, you can't dig too deeply. How far down did you go for this bed?
I went down 2 feet and I was lucky. I only hit a few rocks right. That was fortunate. There's other places you can't even dig in the yard because the lime rock is right on the surface. This is what we were talking about, the limestone being right on the surface. So nothing grows over it. It's just part of the yard. If you'll notice, like right here is one of the friendly bugs, and that kind of keeps the aphids down. This year, the bugs that are the friendly bugs have taken over, and they're keeping the aphids in. He's right there. I don't remember the name. It's not an assassin bug, but it's similar to them.
Okay. Are these bugs on all of the milkweed or just typical milkweed?
No, I found them on all the plants. Anything that the aphids would get on, they're going to go to.
So when you say irrigate this bed,
Mhm.
what is the frequency that you water?
It depends on how dry it gets. Usually I'll watch this hibiscus over here. It's in a pot, and if it gets a little droopy, and I'll feel the soil. So,
And when you feel the soil, what depth do you go?
oh, about finger depth,
Can
about
you
down to
show
my
us?
finger. And just dig like down here, and stick your finger down in there and feel if it's moist. This was our first attempt to do gardening down here. This was before I took my master gardener class and didn't really do any soil samples here. We just would plant things that my wife liked and thought would grow here. We checked the University of Florida salt tolerant list and made sure the plants were on that list. Over the years, amended the soil some and changed the plants. Right now, we've got lantana in there, several different varieties. The yellow lantana is the native variety. This grass I picked up at the Master Gardener plant sale, and they were about a quarter of that size.
They're beautiful. They provide a nice color contrast.
Yes, the lemongrass does really well down here. It also helps keep the mosquitoes away. It's a kind of a natural deterrent to them.
What are your successes here?
After several years amending the soil here, the plants have really taken off this year. It was the soil analysis that helped things. And I do have an irrigation system for this. It's just a regular sprinkler. When it gets dry, we turn it on. But these native plants are pretty tolerant to the drought and the heat. You can see the native lantana down there seems to be doing much better than the non-native species. That one right there, that yellow.
This yellow here.
Yes.
And your biggest barrier here?
It's the salt water. For some reason, it didn't make it into this bed during Debbie, but it did in Idalia, and we had to replant everything.
This died back. when it got soaked with salt water?
About 11 months ago. The water from Adelia came all the way under the house, covered all this up. Pests, I really don't have many pests, and I guess that's because we're kind of isolated down here. Let me walk over here and I'll show you this other place I want to fix.
This is an upcoming project. Before we go there, why don't you tell us a little bit about your thoughts for that project?
I want to do something similar to what's next to the stairs over here. It's going to take more work because there's a lot more rocks over here. This is the next area I want to do. I'm going to put a barrier across here to join in with these rocks right here. And I'll amend the soil and get it to where it's good for the kind of plants that I want to plant. I want to go all the way to the seawall because I don't really need to mow in here. Better to have less grass, more plants.
Can we walk to the seawall?
Yes.
How many feet do you think it'll be?
Probably another 35 or 40 feet and probably 10 feet wide. This is a more shady area than that is over there.
Where did these rocks come from?
Out of the canal. Some of them were here when we bought the house. Some of them were dug up during construction of this part of the house. I had them place them. This line right here is maybe a natural fence.
So when you talked about rocks that come up to the surface that you have in your yard, are these the rocks that you're talking about?
Yes.
And their composition is?
It's limestone.
And that's what makes it so alkaline.
Yes.
And this is the canal?
It goes right around to the Gulf of Mexico. And there's some mullet right there.
Can you tell me a little about the plants that you might be considering?
I want to try more butterfly plants. Got to get some that are more shade tolerant because of the palms.
What variety of palms do you have?
These are our native cabbage palms.
And their advantage is?
Well, they're pretty resistant to storms. The bugs don't really bother them. They do house a lot of insects, cockroaches and mice. Mice aren't an insect, but they do house mice, and a lot of bird species use them for nesting. The hummingbirds like them. I think they get some of the little pieces off the fronds to use in their nests. I see them buzzing around in there.
So that's really quite a habitat.
It's a habitat for lots of things.
Any last advice or tips that you have?
I would say the two most important things I learned was, one, you've got to irrigate, and two, you got to take soil samples. Otherwise, you're just shooting in the dark if you don't do the soil samples. And the extension office can help you with the forms and how to collect the samples.
You take a sample when you start,
Yes.
and then at what frequency?
About every 6 months. That gives you an idea if your soil pH is going in the direction you want it to go in.
Tell us a little about your view out here.
The Gulf of Mexico is right there. We have a beautiful view here. I love waking up in the morning and catching this view right here, and the sunsets are absolutely magnificent. We get some of the prettiest sunsets.
This is the Big Bend area of Florida. Thank you, Chris.